So we already talked about analyzing the vulnerabilities in Linux and in the Docker containers, but let's have a look at the vulnerabilities in the Docker images. So a standard audit process ensures that all containers are based on updated containers and both hosts and containers are configured securely. So in order to validate this audit process, we should bear in mind that all containers should have as minimum as possible privileges and should be fully isolated. So we should always execute the containers with minimum resources and privileges for their execution. So it's important to limit the memory and the CPU as well as the network functions. We should make sure that we only give the privileges and allocate the memory for a container specifically needed to execute its purpose. And this brings me to the next point where we should also limit the memory and the CPU. So limiting the amount of memory available to the container will also prevent attackers from consuming all the memory on the host and killing your services. Limiting the use of CPU and the network can really prevent attackers from executing denial of services attacks. So I would always prefer my containers to have a static memory allocated to them, but not pulling as much memory as they need. Because imagine if an attacker attacks just a single container and this container is allocated all the memory of your space, he can easily create a denial of service attacks by simply leaking the memory of the container and of your entire system. And finally, you should also control very good the access controls. So Linux security models such as the AppArmor and the AC Linux should always be used to enforce access controls and limit the system calls. So you should always make sure that you are checking your images and packages and making sure that they are updated with the last version. You should always use file system in read-only mode, and this will make it way easier to find problems. Also, as I said, our images should be taking up as little space as possible, and even bearing this in mind that the larger the memory of the images is, the more hard it will be for us to audit them. And if you are sure that you have the last version of the images, also make sure that all the tools in your Linux machine and also the kernel are updated with the last versions so you avoid compatibility issues. So we already talked a lot about the different vulnerabilities and their classification, so I wanted to give you some examples of high, medium, and low criticality vulnerabilities. For example, some of the most popular high criticality vulnerabilities are the shell shock, and the shell shock is a vulnerability that allows the attacker to remotely connect a malicious executable to a variable that is executed within your bash interpreter. The other one is the heartbeat, and this is a very critical vulnerability in the open SSL cryptographic software and will allow the attacker to find information that is normally sent in encrypted form using the SSL and TLS protocols. Then a mid-range or the mid-criticality vulnerability would be something like the poodle attack, which will allow the attacker to listen to the communication between two services. And finally, a low criticality would be something like a buffer overflow, where the allocated memory can cause buffer overflow when accessing memory areas that have not been assigned. So if, for example, you want to get the latest vulnerabilities using the NVD, you can definitely use this tool. You can see the address here, and you simply need to use Python 2.7, and then you can run this code from GitHub. If you want also, for example, get all the vulnerabilities for the Red Hat Linux, you can also do that on Red Hat /security updates/CVE. Okay, and here you can see different vulnerabilities discovered into the Red Hat in Linux. So if you want to explore more vulnerabilities, I will definitely make sure that I attach to this section links with all pages with known vulnerabilities in Linux and Docker, since those are the two tools that could be critical for exploiting vulnerabilities into your Docker containers or images. That's it. Thank you very much for watching this section, and I will see you in the next one.